Good morning, students. I am Dr. Poonam Rani Gupta, Associate Professor, Prakriti Devi Kanya Mahavidyalaya. From today, I am going to start a series on literary criticism. It will cover critical theories and practices from Greek classical thinkers to the present day. This series will help students of both UG and PG classes to understand various critical theories and practices in an easy and comprehensible manner. The series also aims at nurturing and enhancing students' critical thinking ability. Today's lecture is on Aristotle. It is in two parts. The first part covers a brief introduction to Aristotle and Poetics, his views on imitation, definition of tragedy, various parts of tragedy, ideal tragic, hero. So now let us begin with an introduction to Aristotle and his Poetics. Aristotle, we all know, he was a disciple of Plato. He was born in Stagira in 384 BC and died in 322 BC. Like his master Plato, he was preoccupied with the idea of poetry and rhetoric. The famous treatise on which his name rests is, of course, the Poetics, which he wrote in about 330 BC. Actually, this book was not written by Aristotle with a view to publish. It is a collection of all the class lectures which he used to deliver to his students. So that is why this treatise possesses all the weaknesses of a lecture note. This is abrupt, disjointed, terse, and digressive also. This is so because so many points which he has taken up, we see that those points he takes up, but he leaves those points. In the Poetics, we see that he has taken up certain points which he has discussed in elaboration. There are certain points which he takes up and promises his students that he is going to analyze them at a later stage, but he has never analyzed them. There are certain points which he takes up but leaves in between. So that is why this treatise is very much digressive and very much disjointed also. At the same time, we see the Poetics possesses all those weaknesses and shortcomings which a lecture note possesses. This is abrupt, disjointed, and awkwardly terse. There are certain essential ideas which are left by the writer unexplained, and there are certain unessential things which he has elaborated. There are certain points which he takes up and he promises to his students to discuss them at a later time, but he has never explained them. So, in short, we can say that it has all the defects of a lecture note. The second book on which his fame rests is, of course, rhetoric, and here he talks about how to speak well publicly. That means it is on the art of speaking well. Let us start with the Poetics. The Poetics deals with nature of poetry. It also deals with the sources of pleasure in poetry and the distinguishing characteristics of poetry. It has 26 chapters and all the chapters they deal with poetry, poetic forms, tragedy, comedy, diction, etc. Now, imitation. Imitation is one of the most important theories as laid down by Aristotle in his Poetics. Aristotle borrows this idea of imitation from his master Plato. It was Plato who first of all evolved the theory of imitation as mimesis. He was of the view that mimesis is the representation or reproduction of a natural object. It is theory of imitation says that poetry is the first and foremost medium of imitation, and imitation is a creative and essential for all fine arts. It also depicts that the object of poetic imitation is man in action. That means whatever imitation is being done by a poet, it is an imitation of the actions of a man. Man's actions, they are external as well as internal, and the poetry tries to imitate both actions of man, that is internal as well as external. And one more thing is also there, that poet, it is the function of a poet to deal with the internal objects of nature and the internal actions of man, and in this manner, in this particular process, the poet tries to imitate the, while in the imitation process, the poet tries to recreate the idea. The poet wants to create an ideal picture of what the reality is. So, in this manner, it involves emotions, passions, feelings, etc., and the poet tries to represent them in as a true. Plato used the term imitation regarding poetry only, but Aristotle, he correlated it with all fine arts. Plato, he used to say that poetry is servile copying, whereas Aristotle was of the view that poetry is, or poetic imitation is, a creative process. And Aristotle, he also used to say that it is not a blind representation of the things, it is not a copy, it is not a blind copy, rather, actually, it is a creative process and it is a common basis of all arts. Plato, on the other hand, he correlates imitation to the painter, and he says that as a painter imitates whatever he sees in the outer nature, similarly, a poet also tries to present the word picture of the outer nature. But Aristotle, again, he refuted this idea of his master Plato, and he said that no, the poet does not imitate the outer reality only, the poet tries to depict the internal reality also, and while in doing so, a poet aims at presenting the idealized picture of society and the man himself. Plato says that poetry is shadow of the shadow, it is two times away from reality. He took the example from the universe. He said that God created this universe after the idea or after the image which was there in his mind. So that is why this universe is first away from reality. And when a poet or a painter tries to imitate the same, we see that he is copying that which is already a copy. So that is why poetry or painting, it is two times away from reality. Whereas Aristotle is of the view that poetry is not a copy of the copy. It embodies the ideal reality of the word, and while writing or while presenting a word picture, a poet tries to present the idealized picture. So Plato, he equates poetry or the imitative artist with the narrative poet, whereas Aristotle equates it with the musician, and he says that every time when a musician tries to copy nature, every time when a musician tries to do something, he tries to, Aristotle equates it with musician who imitates nature but every time creates a new tune irrespective of his person. Now, after dealing the idea of imitation, we see that Aristotle, he gives a definition of tragedy. He says that tragedy is an imitation of an action that is serious, complete, and of a certain magnitude, in language embellished with each kind of artistic ornament, the several kinds being found in separate parts of the play, in the form of action, not of narrative, through pity and fear, bringing about the catharsis of these or such like emotions. This is a translation which is being given by S. H. Butcher in 1902. And in this definition, Aristotle says that tragedy is an imitation of an action. So, what tragedy is? Of course, tragedy is an imitation of the actions of some men, imitation of the actions of a person of high eminence. That is serious. And the actions which are being imitated by the poet, they must be serious ones. They should not have trivialities in them. And the action which is being imitated, it should be complete. It should be complete means what does he want to say? He wants to say that whenever the writer is presenting an action in the form of a story, that story should have a proper beginning, a proper middle, and an end. The story should not begin abruptly. The story should not end abruptly, and let no reader or the spectator ask after the end of the play or after the end of the scene what happens then. Let this question not be there whenever it is being either read or speculated in a theater. Then the next part of the definition is it should be of a certain magnitude. So when it says certain magnitude, magnitude means lofty, high. That means a tragic hero, he should be a man of magnitude. He should be a man belonging to high strata of the society in language embellished. And then Aristotle lays emphasis upon the use of language, and he says that the language which a poet is going to employ while writing a tragedy, it should be embellished one. Embellished means the language should be a decorative one, a language which should be very much ornamental in with each kind of artistic ornament. Artistic ornaments means or the figure of speeches, methods, they should be applied by the writer while writing a story. Several kinds being found in separate parts of the play. So various kinds, various ingredients of tragedy, as we are going to discuss in the forthcoming slides, we will see that Aristotle is of the view that all those kinds they should be found in the play. Then in the form of action, not of narrative. So what type of language and diction should be there? This should be in the form of dialogue. The style, the pattern in which the writer is going to write a play, it should be in a dialogic form, and it should not be narrated as a story or a novel is being done by a novel or a story writer. And the various scenes of the story, they should try to explain, or they should various scenes of the story, they should arise the feeling of pity and fear in the heart of the spectator or the reader in the modern sense, and they should also bring about catharsis or of these or such like emotions. Of these means of pity and fear, and such like emotions means in the same manner or similar emotions. So in this manner, we see that Aristotle here has given us a definition of tragedy. Now, Aristotle he also talks about various parts of tragedy. So he says that the first important part of tragedy is a plot. Plot is the soul of tragedy. So that is why while dealing with any story, a writer should be very much conscious about choosing the plot, about choosing the storyline of the tragedy. Then character. He says he assigns second importance to character. He says that plot is the soul of tragedy, whereas character is not so much essential as the plot is. The third important thing, the third importance is being provided to thought. Fourth, he talks about diction, where he talks about the employment of language, various figure of speeches, at the same time various method and rhetorical devices. Aristotle is of the view that song or the melody, they also play a very significant role in constituting a tragedy. So that is why every writer should be very much conscious about employing song or melody or music to the play. The last significance is being given to spectacle. Spectacle is what? Spectacle is the scenic arrangement. Aristotle says that scenic arrangement, they also play a very important role. But of course, scenic arrangement is of less importance in comparison to plot, character, thought, diction, and song. Now, let us talk about one more important idea, that is the idea of ideal tragic hero. Aristotle has given us this concept of an ideal tragic hero. He says that ideal tragic hero is the protagonist who makes tragedy perform its function properly. And what is the function of a tragedy? Remember in the definition, the cathartic function. The function of catharsis. So, and this function is being performed well with the help of ideal tragic hero. And Aristotle says that ideal tragic hero is a man of lofty eminence in the society. Again, remember definition of tragedy where he says that it should have some magnitude. So magnitude means lofty eminence. The hero, he is a person who is possessing a lofty position in the society. Because what happens when a person of a lofty eminence falls from a certain height, it always creates a sort of awe and fear. At the same time, pity is also being generated in the heart of the readers as well as the spectators. One more thing is also there. He says that ideal tragic hero, he should be a man of intermediate kind. Intermediate kind means he should be a person of mediocre character. He should neither be too good nor be too bad, because Aristotle was of the view that when a totally virtuous person falls or meets his doom and disaster, we never feel one with such a person, and this fall of the hero, it gives us an idea of repulsion. We all the time start thinking that what is the use of being good in the society, and I am not going to be good. So that is why moral lesson, because every good piece of literature should teach us something or the other, and here we see that this particular fall of a good hero, of a totally virtuous hero, is not going to provide any good lesson to us as readers or as spectators. We are planning to be bad. So that is why totally virtuous person or totally godlike person deemed unfit for an ideal tragic hero. Then we see that Aristotle is also of the view that an absolute villain is also deemed unfit for being an ideal tragic hero, because again when such a person dies or meets his doom and disaster, the death of such a person or the fall of such a person, it always creates a sense of poetic justice in us, and we say thank God, because he was such a bad person and he deserved that particular fall. But at the same time, an ideal tragic hero, he should be a man of intermediate kind. He should be a man like us, a mixture of good and evil, who is intending towards, who is inclining towards goodness, but unfortunately, by certain mistake, by certain error of judgment, he is committing some error, and because of that error, he is meeting his doom and disaster, and ultimately suffering. And such a suffering, it creates awe, pity, and fear in us. Herein lies the idea of hamartia. Hamartia, again, it is a Greek term, and it does not include any moral failing. It denotes some error in the judgment or some ignorance. It has a number of shades of meaning. And here we see that Aristotle is of the view that hero, ideal tragic hero, should have hamartia in his character. Because of that hamartia, though it is not a moral falling, that means the hero is not morally deprived. We see that the morality of the hero is absolutely on height, but at the same time the hero is not able to judge his circumstances in a proper manner. The hero is not able to analyze the circumstances in a proper manner, in a suitable way. So that is why, due to the ignorance, or sometimes it is due to the hasty judgment of certain situation, the hero takes a wrong action, and that is of course inclining the hero towards his doom and disaster, and finally the hero dies or suffers his doom or decline. This is all for today's lecture. I have also prepared a graded learning quiz for you. So you go through all these questions and try to solve them. There is also one home assignment which I have prepared. So you read those questions, try to understand them, and try to write the answers of these questions. Thank you. We are going to meet in the next lecture.